Comfortable for you?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I am Vishal Joshi from Lumbini, Nepal. I would like to go in front of you and then start my presentation. My presentation is about Buddha Dharma and the brain, Vipassana, neuroscience, and the science of sustainable living. I would like to start my talk with the words of Buddha. Buddha has well said, O monks and scholars, as you test gold by burning, cutting, and polishing it, so too well examine my speech. Don't accept it out of respect. It reveals Buddha as a pioneer of critical inquiry and evidence based inquiry, urging us not to follow him out of reverence but to test his teachings like gold under fire. And after more than 2500 years later, nowadays, the radical invitation of Buddha regarding direct experience and personal verification has been accepted by modern neuroscience and has started testing all the contemplative techniques of Buddha using functional MRI, electroencephalogram, rigorous clinical trials. And in today's presentation, I would like to share some established evidences with you all. In today's presentation, I have very simple three questions. First, what is Vipassana? I'm here to learn about this. I'm not the expert. I'm a PhD scholar in Lumbini Buddhist University, and my research is on heart rate variability, attention, and Vipassana meditation. And I'm also a medical doctor, so I'm trying to link all these things. What are the neuroscientific evidences of Vipassana? And third, the most important thing, how the neurological changes are linked to sustainable living. What is Vipassana? It's a simple mindfulness. It's mindfulness meditation, seeing things as they really are. Self-transformation through self-observation. There are four foundations of Vipassana: Kayanupassana, Vedananupassana, Chittanupassana, and Dhammanupassana. When somebody practices these four foundations of mindfulness, the wisdom qualities flourish. One starts realizing anicca, dukkha due to clinging nature of mind, and finally anatta. What is sustainable living in Buddha Dharma? The sustainable living in Buddha Dharma begins with mastering the mind. When our mind becomes calm and wise, our actions itself become healthy, ethical, and ecologically harmonious. So, sustainable living in Buddha Dharma is like three-petal flower. It starts with inner sustainability, mental and emotional balance. It leads to ethical and mindfulness and moderate living, and it gives rise to societal and environmental sustainability. There is a simple bridge between mind, brain, and behavior. This thing I want to explain in today's presentation. Buddha has said, Mano Pubbangama Dhamma in Dhammapada. Neuroscience says that when we practice meditation or simply when there are some thoughts in our mind, there is remodeling in brain, and this mechanism is called neuroplasticity. So by practicing meditation, structural changes take place in brain, and activity and connectivity of the brain also change. As a result, when there is change in wiring in our brain, it leads to changed habits, perspectives, and conduct. And this is the inner basis for sustainable living. Now, the most important thing, what is mindfulness and how this mindfulness is responsible or leads to sustainable living in Buddha Dhamma. Vipassana is classical method of sustaining sati. Modern neuroscience has done a lot of research in the name of mindfulness meditation. And in 2011, Holzel and his colleagues postulated 4 mechanisms of action of mindfulness meditation. It means when somebody practices mindfulness meditation for a long time, in his or her brain, there are certain changes, and these changes are as follows. There is first attention regulation, then increase in body awareness, then there is change in perspective of self, and emotional regulation. So Vipassana meditation or mindfulness meditation works through these 4 mechanisms. Attention regulation. My first thing, I will explain all these things one by one and the neuroscience behind these, and I'll link them to the sustainable living. First, attention regulation. First of all, I would like to welcome you all in the world of neuroscience. This is the most beautiful organ, human brain. Human brain is a anatomical structure. So many foldings, innumerable convolutions are there, and this gray portion is cerebral cortex. Brain is a physical structure, and the electrical activity go on inside the brain all the time. Electrical firing go on, and these electrical firings are actually the thoughts. And the activity of this brain is called mind. So every time in our mind, thoughts keep on blooming, like the lotus flower bloom in the ponds. But it's not so simple. Mind wanders all the time. Mind wanders from past to future, here to there, like a monkey mind, often described by our respected Mingyur Rinpoche in his teachings. Monkey mind, it jumps from one place to another place. So when mind is untrained, so many thoughts are there, and these thoughts are actually the electrical activity in the brain. Now I will tell you, I will discuss with you some of the circuits in brain which are responsible for this type of activity. One of such important circuit is default mode network. So the areas highlighted in this cerebral cortical part are the regions of default mode network. In default mode network, automatically there is firing all the time. Click, 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 click. Due to these electrical activities, due to these firing all the time, our mind wanders. There is wandering in mind, and along with wandering of mind, this default mode network is responsible for things like me, my, I, myself, ego. Apart from that, it is for self-centering, and the good news is that when somebody practices Vipassana meditation, there is decrease in activity of this wandering mind, decrease in activity of this default mode network. Like default mode network in our brain, there are few other good networks, anti-networks. One of such network is central executive network, which is made up of different areas like anterior insula, anterior cingulate cortex, and all the areas highlighted here. And this is like anti-correlated with default mode network. When we practice Vipassana meditation, there is increasing activity of this network, and this network decreases the activity of default mode network. I would like to explain this with one analogy. Suppose we are in big class. Suppose this is one very big class, and this big hall is our classroom, and this is our brain. Suppose, with due respect, this side students are there, and this side teachers are there. When teachers are very lazy, suppose the teachers are drowsing like this all the time. When teachers are very lazy, the students will chatter. The students will talk with each other. They do back and forth. They do right and left, and they keep on talking. They keep on wondering. They keep on gossiping. So this is the activity of default mode network, which is always active. But when teachers are alert, when teachers are seeing students vigilantly, when teachers are observing them, the students keep quiet and the teacher's mode is activated. So this teacher's mode is actually executive control network that controls network. So Vipassana meditation strengthens the activity of the executive control network. And so there is simple correlation with, so when there is decrease in self-referential thought, DMN activity, due to reduction in DMN activity, ego-driven craving, tanha, is decreased. In many neurological researches, it is observed that this default mode network is also responsible for craving. Neuroscientists have done studies on smoking, craving for smoking, even for mobile cravings. There is high activity observed in default mode network. So it leads to lower impulsive consumption, more mindful and need-based resources, use of resources will be there, and this fosters sustainable living. Second thing, the second point in Holzel et al. Postulation was body awareness. When somebody practices Vipassana meditation, the awareness of East, due to increase in awareness of the body, certain areas of brain are stimulated. These are temporoparietal junctions. And likewise, when there is change in perspective of self due to practicing Vipassana mindfulness meditation, the static self, the rigid self is dissolved. And again, neuroscientists have discovered that there is stimulation of temporoparietal junction and insula. Apart from these areas, there are also activity in other areas. I am just putting it very simple. So, putting these two mechanisms in one frame, now, when somebody practices Vipassana mindfulness meditation and there is increase in body awareness and there is change in perspective of self, due to these two mechanisms, those regions of the brain are highlighted. Those regions of the brain are highlighted, which are mainly for those areas of brain are highlighted, which are also for empathy and social cognition. In 2004, Singer et al. In their research observed that these two areas are also responsible for empathy and social cognition. And in 2008, Lutz et al. Observed that during functional MRI in Tibetan monks, when they practice compassion meditation, the same areas are being stimulated. So this is such a beautiful correlation. We are practicing mindfulness meditation. We are just observing our body and there is change in perspective of self. And those areas of the brain are stimulated or activated, which are also responsible for compassion, empathy, and social cognition. So empathy with nature and others predict pro-environmental behavior. Compassion converts concerns into helping hands. Social cognition supports shared values and community responsible. So all these mechanisms are fostering sustainable living in human beings. Final, emotional regulation. In our brain, there are different areas. There are different areas for emotion, and there are different area for reasoning and thinking. In a sense, in a simple way, there are two types of brain. One is frontal brain, that is for rational thinking, that is the rational brain, and this lower part is the limbic system. It is the emotional brain. Okay, I will explain this by a simple analogy. I have a kid. He is of 4 years. When he was of 3 years, he was not obeying me. He was always doing some emotional reactivity. He was always asking for chocolates, toys, and when I console him, when I say him, there will be bugs in your teeth, too many toys are not good, he is not obeying to me. But now, I have been a very good friend of him, and after 1 year, when I teach him, he understands things. So it's like that father-son relationship. So this brain is the thinking brain. This brain is the logical brain. This upper brain is the rational brain, and this brain is the emotional brain. This brain is for emotional reactivity, emotional impulsivity, emotional craving, and especially one organ, this amygdala, is for emotional aggression, even for emotional hijacking. So it is observed that when somebody practices Vipassana meditation, there is very good bonding between the rational brain and the emotional brain. We can rationally control our emotional thinking, emotional outputs. So by down regulating the amygdala's sudden and aggressive response, Vipassana can help an individual respond to challenging situation with greater calmness and clarity. Good decision making capability and ethical decision making capability is developed. This also fosters sustainable living. In summary, putting all these things together, the mechanism, when somebody practices mindfulness meditation, it works through actually 5 mechanisms: A, B, C, D, E. Attention regulation, body awareness. C for change in perspective of self. D means decision making is modulated. E, emotional regulation. So very simple 5 mechanisms: A, B, C, D, E. When this is practiced, there are certain changes, certain structural anatomical changes at the level of brain. This gives rise to change in mind. Change in brain is giving rise to change in mind. Positive psychological outcomes are developed. Decreased mind wandering, decreased egocentric attitude, empathetic attitude will be there, compassionate behavior will be there, and control over emotions will be there. And it fosters sustainable living virtues as suggested in Buddha Dharma. So these are the references of my study. And there are few of my studies also, you can follow it. It is on Vipassana meditation. In this study particularly, I have made a conceptual framework or mechanism of action of Vipassana and how this can be implemented in schools. This is most respected place, the birthplace of Buddha, Lumbini. This is the place where we belong. This is Lumbini Buddhist University. Thank you so much.
His Holiness Dalai Lama raised one very interesting question, and this is related to neuroscience. One lady, she was the director of Center of Brain Research in Chicago. She did one experiment that she took 2 groups of mothers who has time to give care to their children and another group who do not have time to give care to their children. And she found that their who give more care to their children, their surroundings of the DNA is changed, chemical surrounding. So he raised the questions to the lady that can you do it by external means so that you don't have to practice all these kind of things. So here also,
Yes.
if we can do such kind of changes by external means called virtual reality, neuroscientists are developing in MIT, then we don't need to have guru. We don't need to go to, practitioner, deep practitioners. Is it possible?
Yes.
Because they discovered a nano wire, very small, thin wire. They were trying to put in the brain and trying to activate those kind of regions so that, this happened.
Yes, sir.
I need to go to see television. That kind of feeling will come to me.
Yes. Sir, actually you are right. Our brain cannot differentiate between the reality and imagination. Even though we are doing some imagination, our brain thinks as it is reality. That's why we are suffering so much. Most of the sufferings are our mental suffering. Most of the sufferings are not really existing. In our mind, we keep on revolving these things, and due to that, such type of things are there, like suffering.
So thank you so much. We are running short of time, and thank you all the panelists. Very short question. Okay.
He was telling about the Karma Vipaka
second slide.
I want to know about the Karma Vipaka, what does it really mean? Because he is talking about impermanence. Want to know about the coexistence of impermanence in one world. What is his view about it?
Okay, maybe if you can respond.
Thank you so much. I think this question is for me.
Yeah,
I am Dr. Joshi.
Jyoti.
Jyoti Joshi, it was okay.
Yeah, if you,
The Karma Vipaka, the second slide, the last point.
Right, Bante, but what is your precise, may I know your precise question? Abada is a term for roga, illness. It's a Pali term where there is pain, abada. Abada is the Pali term for suffering, pain. And karma vipaka is one of the causes of the illness. It's not everything. So many times there is a misconception that when somebody is going through some pain, we say it's karma. Not everything is caused by karma. There are 8 categories and I wanted to clearly show the difference. There are natural causes that can create a problem, an illness. This is from the medical dimension. And there are environmental causes. Even the uncleanliness is one problem. There are other traumatic causes. A trauma can lead to a physical illness, for example, fracture of the bone, and an injury can cause a certain. So there are multiple factors, including the imbalance of the metabolic system of the body. Karma is only one of the several categories that can create a disease.
so you can talk about maybe later. Okay.
Sir,
Okay, thank you all the panelists for very good.
thank you so much. I will request for our Secretary General IBC